And many of you were probably tracking this issue because the issue of broadband became a very hot issue during this session, right from the get-go. And therefore, even the telecom issues were much more elevated. They were often linked together during the session because of their closeness in proximity and how they traveled together. So I thought Sheldon did a great job. I think the thing that, from the task force perspective, we've been at this. We were not the first governor's task force. We're about the 5th governor's task force. We're even not Governor Dayton's first task force. We're the 2nd Governor Dayton task force. And so we've been working at this for quite a while now. And it was about 3 years ago that we recommended $200 million to the governor. And I think a lot of people were really wondering if we had, if we were, sure of that number. But when the governor made his recommendation of $100 million this year, and the Senate, in their budget proposal, did $85 million, that, I think, gave people a lot of confidence that we were closer to the mark than not in terms of what we were doing here. That partnered with a lot of other work that's happening. There still is private investment in the state, and there's still, we are seeing the entrance of the CAF $2 into the state as well.
Could you explain maybe a little bit what that is?
So the CAF $2 over the next 6 years will bring in about $65 million each year. And the challenge, a little bit of the challenge during the legislative session, I would say, is that for the incumbent providers who are getting the Connect America Fund $2 into the state, so our 3 largest incumbent providers, their plans were not necessarily due by the time the legislative session was going to be complete. And so there was a lot of confusion at the Capitol about where the build-out of CAF 2 would happen versus where possibly grant funds could go from the state. I think that through some good language in the bill, and also through the attention of the Office of Broadband, there's going to be a lot of partnering done to make sure that the maximum effort is done to make sure CAF $2 are leveraged and maximized for the people of Minnesota where they are used, and then the state money is used particularly in places where CAF $2 can't be used or won't be used. And so that's kind of a big deal and was a big part of the conversation at the Capitol this year. With that, I would say that took a few weeks to get through that conversation with legislators. Even when I was at the Capitol, I was not a telecom expert, that's for sure. I know more about telecom today than I ever knew when I served 12 years in the House. And so, Sheldon and Senator Schmidt are certainly 2 of the experts on this issue. They know more than most of their colleagues, almost all of their colleagues. And so to go before committees where people are, easily kind of wondering what does that number mean or what does that number mean, it takes a lot of work to keep re-educating. So when we're dealing with all these speed goals and things like that, constant re-education we're doing. The big thing, we had several other big pieces that we wanted this year out of the task force. One was the updating of the speed goals. Representative Johnson mentioned that. We thought that was important. They expired at the end of 2015. And the importance of that is twofold. One, to be able to measure appropriately in the state through the mapping process to know what speeds Minnesotans are having their broadband delivered at. We needed some baseline. We went at the basic level with the FCC definition at the task force level. And then we have the stretch goal. And the stretch goal is one provider across Minnesota being able to provide at that 100 by 20. And that 100 by 20 actually became important then later on when we got to the question of unserved and underserved. That that question also, and Representative Johnson talked about this briefly, that really became the other, I think, big thorny topic in the legislative session. So, you know, underserved is pretty clear. If you were below 25 and 3, you are eligible for the program to come in and apply for the grant. But if you are, in the past, if you were in an underserved category, which Minnesota uniquely had defined in the states, we uniquely had defined that definition, then you could participate, what I would say, is in that window, in that underserved to unserved window, you had a chance. And what was going to potentially happen is that there would be no window of participation for communities anymore if there was not an underserved definition. The task force actually thought it was important to have an underserved definition as a question of where do you make that cutoff, what's reasonable. Senator Schmidt moved and proposed that the 100 by 20 be that underserved definition, and that actually ended up being accepted by everyone at the end of the day. The trade-off is, and I will disagree, I don't think the right of first refusal really survived. There was stronger language in the House bill for a true right of first refusal for providers. That was scrapped in favor of codifying the challenge process. So the program from the get-go has had a challenge process that was modeled after the ARA challenge process that many of you may be aware of. And that was important because we know that to wisely use the limited dollars, we want to make sure that there are not overbuilds and things like that going on, and we don't want to inadvertently with the public dollars move into an area with the public dollars where someone's planning on building out in the next 18 months to 24 months. So this challenge language was substituted in and agreed upon at the end of the day instead of that true right of first refusal. Right of first refusal actually would have been, I think, too far and too strong for what anyone was really looking for in terms of what was happening. The task force had many other recommendations we would have liked to see in terms of educational spending,